Welcome to Deprogram. This is video number 96. I've got a question for you. If you know that politicians are involved with organised crime, and you know that they're destroying the country that you live in, is it right to fund them, either directly or indirectly? Or would you consider that a wrongdoing? Do you think encouraging the population to support their own enslavement through higher prices and hidden taxes is any better than encouraging people to support their own enslavement through direct taxes and inflation? Is either one any better than the other? Either way, you're in support of slavery. And so with that in mind, I want to show you how Gerald Celente is actually living in cognitive dissonance.
Hello, everybody. This is Gerald Celente, and it's Tuesday, January 14th, 2025. And your new Trends Journal's coming out soon. And here's the cover. Yep. America. Trillions for fighter jets to kill millions. Pennies for firefighting planes to save millions. Here we are in the 21st century, and you can't put out fucking fires. Look at the low-life, stupid pieces of fucking shit running the country in a country near you. One low-life piece of scumbag, arrogant shit. And that's what politicians are. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. And then the little bureaucrats, little arrogant pieces of shit. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. Like the politicians who can't get a job in the real world and suck into the political system. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. And how do I know? I was there. I was the assistant to the Secretary of the New York State Senate. Worked on major political campaigns in Westchester County. Designed and instructed the course, American Politics and Campaign Technology, how to run political campaigns. Taught it at St. John's University. Was on the other side. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. That's why I quit. But I wouldn't know what I know if I wasn't on the other side. The people are running countries, cities, and states are the lowest pieces of fucking shit you could find anywhere. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. The horror that these poor people in California are living through. Can you imagine losing everything? You can't put out a fucking fire? You see this thing coming? Oh, no, but we could kill people all over the world. Hey, how about another $1 trillion to the military-industrial complex? Yeah. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. Disgusting. Disgusting. I feel so bad for these people. My God. Could you imagine losing everything you own? Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. Anyway, gold went up $15. Now it's what, $2,677. And oil prices are now, Brent crude is around $80 a barrel. You go back to December, $71 a barrel. Why the prices go up? Because the fucking shithead scumbag politicians, we're going to put sanctions on Russia so we can cut back the oil. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. Yeah. So oil prices are going up. It's a disaster out there. And you read your economic update, and we're showing you what's going on in one country after another. One country after another. And what's going to happen with the tariffs? Trump came out today and said they're going to pass a whole new legislative body to make sure these taxes happen, the tariffs happen. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. And as President McKinley had said, what do you want? Cheaper prices or higher wages? And I believe in self-sustaining economies. And you can see it by what happened with Russia when Little Joe Biden said we're going to punish Putin. They put sanctions on Russia when the Ukraine war began in February 2022. And we said Russia has all the human and natural resources they need to be self-sustaining. So all these companies that pulled out, the Starbucks, all these places, the Russian people took them up.
In other words, Gerald does not believe that the American people could bring back manufacturing in the United States and prosper as free people. He believes they need to be covertly stolen from in order to fund organized crime. That's what Gerald thinks is necessary.
But so inflation's going up as well. And then they're saying inflation's going down in Europe. And they got to lower interest rates. Inflation's not going down. You look at energy and food prices, they keep going up. Again, the numbers are rigged. People are suffering. And bad situations are only going to become much worse. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. You know, we're looking at mortgage rates now, and they're the highest in 6 months. In the meanwhile, corporate bankruptcies had hit a 14-year high. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. So mortgage rates are up, bankruptcies are up, and the reason the bankruptcies are up is because rates were so low before when they fought the COVID war, and now they're up. So it goes back that both of these things are connected. So again, we're forecasting that Trump is going to lower interest rates. He pushed the Federal Reserve to do it back in December of 2018, when the Dow had its worst December since 1931, the Great Depression. And what else do we have here? Eurozone economy remains in danger, new data shows. That's right. And we have extensive articles in here. The reasons it's in danger, it's the same shit. Scumbag bureaucrats. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. The bureaucratic laws that these fuckfaces make up, they're out of their mind. And all they want is power. They're power-hungry little fucking freaks that never work a day in their life and just suck off the public tit. Oh, like Joe Biden? What did he suck off the public tit? Was he like 80 years old, 81 years old? He only sucked off it for 60 years? Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. And what's all they are? A bunch of public tit suckers. What else do we have here? UK government's borrowing costs reached 27-year high. All right, we're mentioning this because they're saying that the UK, it's the FUCK because of the little fucking shitheads you got running it. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. Donald Trump, President-elect Donald Trump, has promised to allow the Israeli regime's prime minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, to resume the campaign of genocide in the besieged Gaza Strip. Again, I agree with the tariffs, just to make it clear. After signing a potential ceasefire deal with Hamas, according to Israeli media. Ynet News, citing a source familiar with the matter, reported today that Trump has promised Netanyahu that if he agrees to a ceasefire and the withdrawal of Israeli military forces from Gaza, he will support Tel Aviv retroactively if it decides to resume war and violate the truce.
In other words, Donald Trump is a genocidal war criminal, and you want him to be funded through the blood, sweat, and tears of the American people indirectly through tariffs. Out of all of the people who support Gerald Celente, how many of them do you think pay for his weekly magazine and never even have the time to open it? I never open any of the magazines. I don't have time to do it. But I pay for the subscription because I like Gerald and I want to support his operation. And now he's putting me in a position where I feel like I'm supporting the enemy. If you want to fund politicians directly or indirectly, then you are the enemy of freedom. And that's just how it works, objectively. Not because it's my opinion or because I feel some way about it. It's got nothing to do with my feelings. It is an objective truth that if you want to fund politicians, then you are against the freedom of the people. I cut off all direct funding of government when they told me that my business is non-essential. I'm already funding government indirectly because there are taxes on top of taxes on top of taxes in everything we buy. So I don't have a choice about funding this organized crime extortion racket indirectly, but I sure as hell am not going to fund them directly. And instead of Gerald encouraging his viewers to join somebody like me, he's encouraging you to support your own enslavement and fund organized crime covertly. I pay a high price for taking this position that I take. I'm under constant harassment. Phone calls, letters in the letterbox. I had the sheriffs coming here thinking they were going to take my belongings. Lucky they can't get through the front gate, they just leave a card there. But then I've rung them up to talk to them about it. Whoever answers the phone, they have no idea what's going on. So I wrote them a letter. And I explained in the letter that I cannot fund organized crime and genocide. And I sent them my videos. And I told them that they have a duty to protect and serve. I wrote in the letter, if you're trained in the use of firearms, you need to go and arrest these people because there's a genocide going on. People are getting injected with this stuff every day and it's killing people. As long as you're not doing your duty to protect and serve and defend the pregnant women and children who are being poisoned to death, I cannot fund you. And I asked them to stop harassing me. Admittedly, I'm not overly concerned about having my belongings stolen because I always keep enough cash on hand that if they ever came here and got through the gate, I could just pay them. So it's not really that stressful for me. And I'm pleased to be able to say that the harassment has backed off a little since then. But that's all beside the point. People like Gerald leave me standing out here on my own. And Gerald Celente is somebody that I thought I could trust to, at least if not stand with me side by side, he could at least not encourage people to indirectly fund the extortion racket, the organized criminals who are destroying our world. But this is what he's doing. He doesn't want you to see how badly you're being robbed. He wants you to be robbed covertly. For those of you who follow my work here, you will know that I have invested a huge portion of my life into encouraging people like Gerald to join forces and form an organization, which makes it look like talking about him and others like him who are actually working against themselves in this way is defeating all the work that I've been doing, because instead of appreciating what I've been doing and supporting me, they'll turn against me. And if that's the case, so be it. I know what's right. You don't need my help to show you the crime that CNN or any of these mainstream propaganda organizations are involved in. All that stuff is right in your face. So I'm much more concerned with those of us who actually are on the side of truth and peace and justice. When I see people on our side going wrong, that's when I feel a duty to talk about it. If they can't appreciate me showing where they're in cognitive dissonance, that's their issue to answer. I'm doing what I have to do. And what I have to do is point out the complete and utter hypocrisy in complaining about government and politicians, while at the same time not only funding them annually with your taxes, which I'm sure Gerald has continued to do, but encouraging people to accept funding organized crime covertly. He claims to be against organized crime and war and theft, while simultaneously enabling it. It's cognitive dissonance, it's hypocrisy, And if I don't bring it to your attention, then who's going to do it? You know, we don't need to fund these criminals. We need to starve them to death. We need to cut them off. Not fund them, not directly or indirectly. We need to starve them. Otherwise, we really have no grounds to be complaining about the crimes that they commit. It's pure hypocrisy, and I hope you can see that. I'm going to close out this video by tagging on another video that I have already sent to Gerald Celente when I asked him about this. Check out this video on tariffs and be sure to keep up with my daily articles. I'm writing a lot of information that you're not going to get anywhere else in the world because nobody else has the courage to say and do what needs to be said and done. So I'll stand here alone and do it for as long as it takes.
China. In 2016, Donald Trump ran on a campaign promise to introduce tariffs on Chinese goods and bring back manufacturing jobs to the US. On paper, the plan sounded great and certainly resonated with his core group of followers. But the truth is, his ensuing trade war was a total failure. Conservative estimates show that 92% of the tariffs imposed on China were borne by American companies and consumers. Once again, this is basic economics and exactly why CNBC is now reporting that Trump's proposed tariffs could raise prices for consumers and slow spending. Instead of learning from past mistakes, which, let's be honest, isn't one of Trump's strong points, Trump now wants to implement 60% tariffs against all Chinese imports. Frankly speaking, this would be a disaster for the US economy and cause inflation to absolutely skyrocket, which is actually quite ironic, as rising inflation and high cost of living was a major factor contributing to Kamala's loss. I recently had the pleasure of interviewing Jeffrey Sachs, a world-renowned economist from a Columbia University who exposes the truth of the US-China trade war. You know, our American economy, our American way of life really depends on China.
Absolutely. And our economy depends on China. Their economy depends on us, not to every dollar or yuan, but for our prosperity. This has been a tremendously beneficial two-way trade. Right. By the way, the first principle of international economics, which I have taught for 44 years, is mutual gain. Yes. Trade is not about one side winning and the other side losing. That's how generals think. But economists say trade is about mutual gain. We get something, you get something.
Correct.
And the United States has overall been enriched by China's rise.
The U.S. has been enriched by the rise of China and a fruitful 50-year diplomatic relationship. But the only message you hear from Donald Trump's government is China is winning. China is taking our jobs. Make America great again. Trump wants to impose 60% tariffs on all Chinese imports. But has anyone stopped to think, what happens if China retaliated and imposed a 60% tariff on American exports to China? Let's see how this would work in the real world by examining the American farm industry. Take a look at this graph, which shows how China is the largest export market for U.S. farmers. The Chinese market is considered to be irreplaceable, and if China responded to Trump's tariffs with 60% tariffs of its own, the U.S. could lose a vast proportion of its soybean and corn exports. The most ironic part is that U.S. farmers overwhelmingly support and voted for Donald Trump, but they could ultimately become the biggest losers of this new trade war with China. Once again, listen to Professor Sachs address the issue of Americans losing their jobs to China and why ultimately China is still the ideal trading partner for the U.S.
If you're in a factory competing directly with a highly efficient, low-cost Chinese exporter who's able to encroach in your market, yeah, you may lose. You may lose your job, your wage may go down, and so forth. 2 points about that. One, somewhere else in the United States, there's a huge winner. There's someone who's exporting to China. All of us as consumers, because we're able to get our Apple phones or just about anything else that we have, that has efficient Chinese production in it. So we're winning that way. Our standard of life and our quality of life has gone up. Now, the principle of international trade is that the winners win more than the losers lose because there's a net gain for both societies. But what is also true is if our society is really stingy, so the winners pocket their winning and the losers are left in their own, you're going to have disgruntled people in the losing areas. And in our case, in the United States, while the U.S. overall has been a huge beneficiary of trade with China. And by the way, I said this in California recently, and they were very surprised to hear this because no one talks like that.
Right.
I said, are you kidding? You've been enriched. You're the IT center of the world, but you don't produce things. China produces your goods and gives incredible profits to your design, like NVIDIA. So if we were a little less cruel to those who suffer an adverse consequence, say from import competition, we would be honest to also say, look at how our country as a whole have gained. How many companies have found huge markets in China? How many companies produce in China? How many companies are engaged with China in supply chains? That's what honesty would be. We don't have it in our politics.
Professor Sachs is right. We don't have honesty in American politics, and it's why over 70% of Americans went to the polls last week agreeing with this statement. The United States is going in the wrong direction. But of course, a new administration does bring hope for change in America, and here are some pretty incredible words from Vice President-elect J.D. Vance, who reveals why China has been so successful with its foreign policy and why the U.S. needs to make a change.
We have built a foreign policy of hectoring and moralizing and lecturing countries that don't want anything to do with it. The Chinese have a foreign policy of building roads and bridges and feeding poor people, and I think that we should pursue a foreign policy, a diplomacy of respect, and a foreign policy that is not rooted in moralizing. It's rooted in the national interest of this country.
If Donald Trump genuinely wants to revive the American economy, his first step should be to seek cooperation and assistance from China, because without that, there's little hope for its success. Remember what I said earlier. China's position of strength is long-term planning, and in the past 4 years, U.S. trade has increasingly become a smaller portion of Chinese exports. In fact, when we look at the data, Chinese exports to the U.S. are now less than 3% of China's total GDP. China is the largest trading partner to over 120 countries around the world, financing trillions of investment projects on every corner of the globe through its signature Belt and Road Initiative, and has built up a large domestic base of manufacturing to sustain itself for the future. Just look at this graph, which shows you how quickly Western auto brands are losing market share in China. 4 years ago, legacy car brands dominated the Chinese auto industry, enjoying a 64% market share. Fast forward to today, and the chart has inverted, with Chinese companies controlling the future of China's domestic auto industry. Auto experts like Michael Dunn, who created this chart, now predict that within the next 5 years, all Western auto brands will be finished, and the entire Chinese auto industry will be dominated by local Chinese brands instead. Once again, China is in a position of strength and knows a renewed trade war from Donald Trump would ultimately hurt American companies and consumers much more than it could hurt China. The best case scenario would be a world where the US and China could work together for mutual benefit. And once again, auto industry expert Michael Dunn outlines a perfect example of what this would look like. President Trump will definitely not allow any Chinese car imports. He will not tolerate any backdoor action through Mexico either, but he might be open to a deal that features Chinese billion-dollar investments in new plants, job creation, tax revenues, and supply chain development, and perhaps mandate some American ownership oversight. Basically, China's playbook reciprocated. Everyone, we're going to continue watching this story for you and make videos that keep you up to date.